Good evening. This is Debbie Silberberg, and I am hosting tonight's writers event. And I am very excited to be hosting this event. We have four seasoned authors, who will be talking about everything from what to do if you have writer's block to what your publishing path will be. So I'm going to ask that if you have questions, you put them in the Q&A, and at the end of each section, I will be reading them to the authors. Also, stay till the end because we're going to be giving out a great prize to one of the members of the audience. So I'm going to pass it off to Debbie.
Hi, my name is Debbi Cracovia. I'm a writing coach and also nonfiction published author. Very excited to be here today and talking to all of you. I'm going to flip on my PowerPoint presentation, so you may or may not lose me. I'm not quite sure, so we'll get started. Okay, so today I'm here to talk about writer's block. So interestingly enough, who gets writer's block? So a survey was done at Stanford University where they surveyed about 1,500 people and found that 70.7% of people actually get writer's block at some point in their career as writers, but 24% have writer's block all the time. So that's kind of pretty staggering numbers there for you. So let's talk a little bit about the top 5 reasons, or first of all, let me go over what we'll cover. So today we're going to talk about the top 5 reasons for writer's block. We're going to talk about things you can do when you get stuck and a couple of reasons why people get stuck. And then I'm going to give you some takeaways that you could try at home. So first thing I want to talk about is, does everybody get this little meme up here? I don't always get writer's block, but when I do, I hope you all get that because I thought that was really cute. So the first reason people get writer's block is time and procrastination. So let's talk a little bit about this. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Jim Rohn. He was a motivational speaker, an entrepreneur, also an author. And he had a quote that most of us are familiar with. He goes, if you really want to do something, you'll find a way, you'll make the time. But if you don't, it's just an excuse. So if time or procrastination is a reason why you find yourself not writing, think about what's holding you back and why. The next thing is the lack of support. And this can mean a lot of things to a lot of people on a lot of different levels. But basically, Maslow's theory of hierarchy, if anybody's familiar with that, says that you can't reach a higher level of creativity or higher level of emotional well-being unless your basic needs are being met. And that includes, food, a roof over your head, clothing, having all of those basic needs met. So if you have a lack of support, is it emotional? Is it physical? Only you would know that, but try to figure out ways to make sure that those basic needs are being met. Now, the next one is very dear to my heart, perfectionism, because even with this presentation, I wrote it several hundred times. Now, maybe I'm exaggerating there, but I did practice a lot with various people to get feedback and made changes accordingly. So for me, I will rewrite a scene or a chapter 100 times before I think it's okay. So I've had to learn throughout my writing career to know when enough is enough. So perfectionism, a lot of people have that. It's never good enough for anybody else to see. Now, the next thing is loss of interest in your current work in progress. So this happens more so with newer writers than seasoned writers. And they actually have a term for it. It's called shiny new object syndrome. So basically, when you start on a new project, you get this incredible idea, you go to sit down and write the story in one sitting, and then find like, oh no, I don't know, where it's going. So whether you're a fiction writer, poet, nonfiction writer, ask yourself some key questions. Maybe that idea is just not developed enough. If you're a fiction writer, maybe the plot isn't developed or you don't know your characters well enough. But if it's a poet, maybe you're finding that the words are stale or not rhyming or whatever. But it's usually caused by some technical issue within the writing, something that you could definitely fix easily. Now, the next thing is imposter syndrome and fear. Basically, they kind of go together. You know, a lot of people will question, who am I to write about that topic? Or who am I, you know, I don't know enough about it to be a reliable source. And fear also comes in a lot of different um, areas too. It could be the fear of failure, the fear of success. I know a writer, she has a fear that she's a nonfiction writer, what she writes today may be irrelevant down the road. You know, so there's a lot of different fears that people have when it comes to their writer's block. So do any of these sound familiar? And when you're evaluating, you know, your cause, you know, and it doesn't have to be everything that's listed there, but really be honest with yourself. When did you stop writing? What are some of those, you know, feelings? So the next thing I want to do is kind of talk about what you can do now if you are experiencing writer's block. So the first concern would be, you know, you're too busy everything else you're too busy with everything else but to write. Again, I'm going to refer back to Jim, you know, his thoughts on the subject. If you find that you're too busy, try to figure out, you know, why that is. And some things you can do just to get writing would be keep a journal. Some of you might be familiar with Jules Cameron and the Artist Way. She basically suggests writing 3 pages in the morning. First thing when you wake up, she calls them morning pages. And her reason behind that is she feels that we're at our most authentic self before the day gets going and we start worrying about the day's events. So her suggestion is writing 3 pages longhand, no computers, nothing, you know, just pen and paper. And you'll see that when you first start writing, you'll be writing things like, I don't know what to write. And then you'll be writing, well, you know, today I did this, or yesterday this happened. And then before you know it, you might be writing your lists. And then all of those things that you might have complained about, you know, earlier on, start turning into creative ideas. And and if you do this for a period of time, you'll see from what you were writing in the beginning versus what you're doing now is drastically going to change. Also, if you don't want to do morning pages, you know, morning's not your thing, you can write, you know, keep a journal anytime. F. Scott Fitzgerald used to carry around a journal, and he used to just jot down conversations or jot down interesting places or people that he saw, you know, and he later on used them in his works. In fact, they say the Great Gatsby was actually his real neighbor, that he wrote a lot of notes about. So you just never know. The next thing to talk about is, you know, when did you start or stop writing? I have a friend that's a technical writer, and she used to spend, you know, years writing manuals and white pages and business correspondence and letters. She could not come up with a fiction idea, you know, to save her life. So what we suggested, because this was a writers group that I was in my local library, is that she, instead of trying to, you know, think of ideas to write about, that she maybe partake in some fan fiction. What movie did she see recently that she liked? Use those characters and kind of create a different scenario. So there's a lot of things that you could do when, you know, you find that you've stopped writing or can't come up with the ideas. The other thing is, you lose your creativity. You know, Maya Angelou wrote there and wrote, you know, pages of the cat in the hat or the cat is sad or, you know, things very, very mundane, to create her spark. And that's really what you want to do is have some play and get playful and have joy. So you lose the creativity. It may not be from lack of desire, though they can overlap, but do fun things with it. You know, again, if you need to have the input versus the output, you know, read a good book, find an article of something that you're interested in, learn a new hobby. You know, all of those things will help you get back that creative process and enjoy. And the other thing you want to do is ignite your passion. You know, it kind of goes hand in hand, but there's a lot of things you could do to, you know, create that passion again. What were the reasons that you started writing? Write a list. Um, what was the idea that sparked your interest in writing? Are you part of a group? Talk to and brainstorm with fellow writers. So there's a lot of things that you can do to, reignite that spark, the whole reason why you started writing to begin with. And again, it doesn't matter if you're a fiction writer, if you're a nonfiction writer, if you're a poet, all of those things are wonderful. And I know that, every one of us has an author inside. So things that you can try at home. There's a lot of things you can do just to get those juices flowing. And the first thing I'm going to suggest is brainstorming. How I like to brainstorm is I want to be a New York Times bestseller. I want to write a series. I'm going to write the titles of my next 5 best-selling, my next 5 bestsellers. And it's going to be in my series. And get ridiculous, get fun, have fun. The other thing you can do is create new words. And the easiest way to do this is take 2 nouns. And I'll give you an example. I created a butterfish. So not only did I create a butterfish, but then I took it to the next level and made a definition. So a butterfish is a bottom dweller in the oceans. And the reason they don't come up to the top is if it's sunny out, they will melt, just like butter. But it's ridiculous, I know, but it actually fits in my work in progress. So when you're creating these new words and the definitions for them, try writing a paragraph. And if it works and fits into your work in progress, always be mindful of that. Always be mindful of your work in progress, because you never know where you're going to get inspiration. But if it fits into it, all the better. Another thing that you can do that helps a lot is writing about the different seasons using all 5 senses. A lot of time writers will get hooked on vision. I mean, you'll see a lot of writing that all it is, kind of you're watching a movie, but they forget about enriching all the other senses of taste and touch and smell. So you definitely want to make sure that you're writing about the seasons with all senses. And take it a step further, write about a place and a season that you love, do a little world building with it, and then flip it over, because any good fiction, your characters have a goal, a motivation, and a conflict. So flip it over, write about a season and a place that you don't want to be, because along with the good, we have to create that bad as well, just to balance it out, balance your writing out. So basically, we've covered today, the top 5 reasons people get writer's block, who gets writer's blocks, and some things that you can do when you have writer's block. So I hope this is helpful. I want to thank you guys again for having me. If anybody would like to reach out, of course, ask questions if you have any, but my information's here. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, really all social media, Twitter, Insta, I'm on everything. So my website is lovetowrite2.com. Would love to hear from you. All right. Thank you.
And so far, you were concise and nobody has any questions for you. Although I do have to say, I love your butterfish.
Thank you. As an example, but it's that easy. I mean, no, I shouldn't say easy, but yeah, if you're stuck, feel free to do that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And next we're going to hear from Elf.
Hi, I'm Elf Ahearn. I'm going to be talking about conflict, suspense, and action. And specifically, I want to give you some ideas about how you can increase all of them and basically just write about them. There are thousands of books and even more classes on how to write a novel. The implication is if you follow their directions, you'll have a bestseller. Same as baking a cake, all you need are the proper ingredients. However, if that were truly the case, we'd all be writing bestsellers. According to Lee Child, who's the author of the Jack Reacher novels, it's not as important to use the exact ingredients as to keep your cake eaters hungry. Humans have an innate desire to find out what happens in the end. So to maintain suspense, start with an unanswered question. The best novels captivate readers by presenting a powerful motivation that launches the protagonist on a conflict-filled journey to achieve a goal. Each scene must offer a conflict that, once overcome, brings the protagonist closer or farther from their goal. These conflicts can include something as simple as a conversation, a physical barrier, an argument, a violent action, and basically everything in between. The key is to keep readers in suspense so they keep turning pages to learn the answer to the unanswered question: does the protagonist reach their goal? Having said that, I'm going to concentrate on the nuts and bolts here of conflict, action, and suspense, the cake's ingredients. A sense of place. Before a reader can dive headlong into a story, they must be provided with a location. Establish each scene's setting in the opening paragraphs or closely thereafter. If you want to bring the suspense to a boil, make the location a tight fit. Put your hero in a closet, a bedroom, a corner. In Sue Monk Kidd's best-selling book, The Secret Life of Bees, Lily, the 14-year-old heroine, is in a peach stand when her father, T-Ray, enters. She's afraid of him, so when he squats down, Lily feels like she's caught in a hot dark that I could not break free of. T-Ray tells Lily how her mother died, and these are the lines that follow. Now T-Ray scooped up a handful of dirt and let it fall out of his hands. The day she died, she was cleaning out the closet, he said. I remember, I said. My voice sounded small and far away to me, like it was coming from an anthole in the ground. His eyebrows lifted, and he brought his face closer to me. Only his eyes showed confusion. You what? I remember, I said again. You were yelling at each other. A tightening came into his face. Is that right? He said. His lips had started to turn pale, which was the thing I always watched for. I took a step backward. God damn it, you were 4 years old, he shouted. You don't know what you remember. You see how action depicts Ray's menace and emotional state as interpreted by Lily. Kid doesn't say T-Ray looked upset. Instead, she ramps up the suspense by letting readers see the action Lily sees and sense that imminent violence that Lily can't escape because she's trapped in that peach stand. Intense action. The first rule of writing a fight scene is to not over-explain the character's movements. Allow readers to choreograph the activity in their minds. What I specifically mean is, don't use a lot of right hand does this while the left foot does that. Once, maybe at the beginning of the action seems to be the norm, but I'm not even sure that that's necessary. I'm going to offer you a list of things that you'll need for a successful fight scene. First, sentence length. Short, choppy sentences add to the pace of an action scene. So avoid those long descriptions. Verbs, use them. Make the fight uneven. Put the protagonist at a disadvantage. And description, like I said, don't overdo with the left-right. And really fun is the ticking time bomb. Nothing gets the heart racing more than a short amount of time to accomplish something that's absolutely critical. Now here's an extreme action scene from the mega bestseller, The Bourne Identity by Robert Ludlum. Jason Bourne is in a Swiss bank from which there is only one exit when he's forced into an elevator at gunpoint. Bourne grabbed the Frenchman in front of him now. his left arm around the man's throat, his right hand tearing at the man's left ear. "How many?" he asked in French. "How many are down there? Where are they? Find out, pig." The elevator was halfway to the first floor lobby. Jason angled the man's face down, ripping the ear half out of its roots, smashing the man's head into the wall. The Frenchman screamed, sinking to the floor. Bourne rammed his knee into the man's chest. He could feel the holster. He yanked the overcoat open, reached in, and pulled out a short-barreled revolver. He jammed the gun into the Frenchman's open mouth. "Tell me, or I'll blow the back of your skull off." The man expunged a throated wail. The weapon was withdrawn, the barrel now pressed into his cheek. Two. One by the elevators, one outside on the pavement by the car. What kind of car? Peugeot. Color? The elevator was slowing down, coming to a stop. Brown. The man in the lobby, what's he wearing? I don't know. Jason cracked the gun across the man's temple. "You'd better remember. A black coat." You see, Jason Bourne's goal is to leave a Swiss bank. He is forced into an elevator by a man with a gun. There's his conflict. Now, Jason wants to stay alive. Goal. To stay alive, he must know who's waiting for him in the lobby. Goal. The armed guy won't tell him. Conflict. Jason must get this information before the elevator opens on the lobby. He nearly rips the guy's ear off to find out. Action achieves the goal. Suspense is built into the scene. One, because Jason is the underdog. Two, they're in a tight space. Three, he must take violent action in order to survive. And what really brings it home is that ticking time bomb. The information he must have before that elevator stops. Now here's a second tip. Notice how Ludlum lets us know Jason is standing in front of the Frenchman, and then he describes what happens. Bad writers will often put a character at the door, and then the next thing you know, he's at the fireplace. Explanations of movement are not boring. In fact, readers grow confused if they can't follow a character's movement, and that's just about the time they close the book. Build in inner tension. According to movie script doctor Michael Haig, a well-rounded protagonist should have an identity and an essence that are in conflict with one another. Readers, if they like the protagonist, will want them to realize their true selves. Through identity, and though identity versus essence won't generate the kind of suspense found in a spy novel, it will keep readers turning pages. Now, what Haig means by identity is the person the protagonist shows to the world. Essence is who they are in their heart of hearts. For example, in Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, George's identity is a guy who could get along great without Lenny. "God almighty, if I was alone, I could live so easy. I could go and get a job and work in no trouble, no mess at all. And when the end of the month come, I could take my $50 and go into town and get whatever I want." George's essence, however, is that of a caretaker. He knows Lenny can't survive without him, and he never abandons Lenny despite all the problems he causes. George's essence is at war with his identity. He doesn't appreciate his essence one bit, and that's what makes him such a compelling character. Goals come in layers. Layer one is your overall goal, which you could also call your motivation. What is it that moves a protagonist off the couch and into the hunt for a killer? What pushes them into the dating scene in search of a husband. It's a goal they feel they must achieve. Now, here's a tip. Overarching goals don't have to remain the same from the beginning of the book to the end. The protagonist may want to become a movie star, but then realize she hates Hollywood. Maybe she's working in a flower shop and decides owning one will make her happier. The goal has shifted, but she still has one. Now, there's immediate goals as well as the overarching goal. And the immediate goal should be present in every scene and every chapter, and they should be clearly understood by readers. These smaller goals are what drive conflict. In Of Mice and Men, George tells Lenny what to do so they can achieve the goal of getting hired. The conflict is, will Lenny remember? George gestured with a spoon. What are you going to say tomorrow when the boss asks you questions? Lenny stopped chewing and swallowed. His face was concentrated. I ain't gonna say a word. Good boy. Now here's a tip. Hiding your protagonist's immediate goal does not build suspense. In a novel I read, the heroine wanted the address of the hero, but the writer didn't tell readers that. Therefore, when she sees a pet food vendor on the street who might know the address, she runs barefoot out to ask him. Not explaining the goal up front made the heroine's choice of running barefoot into the street utterly ridiculous. So, in conclusion, suspense is generated by an unanswered question. The journey to find the answer to that exposes the protagonist to conflicts standing in the way of achieving their goal. These conflicts can be passive or violent, but they all require action. Action can demand an all-out brawl or the raising of a single eyebrow. As long as every scene moves the character through conflict to get closer to their goal, the meaning, the answer to the unanswered question, you will sustain the suspense. Thank you.
Thank you, Elf. Again, we don't have any questions. Your presentation was very straightforward, and I have a huge appreciation for everything it takes for you guys to become published authors now, knowing all the different techniques that you have to use at the same time. So next, we're going to hear from Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet Lane Walters. I've been a published author since 1968, but it's been off and on because I put through 4 children through college, earned 2 college degrees myself, and I'm now back to writing full time. I'm going to talk about query letters. A query letter is something that you need to interest an agent or a publisher in looking at your work. And what you need to do, there's 2 parts to it. There is the letter, which is you, and then there is a synopsis, which is your story. The letter is, whenever you start your letter, you write who you are, and you also write why you can write this. Now, I write medical romances, so whenever I had to write the query letter, I said, I am a nurse, I'm married to a doctor, and I understand the medical field. And this gave me a boost to get into publishing this type of books. Now, what you also need to do, you also need to let them know if you've written anything before. Even if you've written letters to the editor and been published, this is being published. And so anything that you've written, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, putting it down is always good. This is your credits. Then we come to the synopsis. Now, the synopsis follows a pattern. And they used to, when I began writing, they wanted 10 to 12 page synopsises, which practically told the whole story. And many times authors wrote this query letter, and then when it was time to write the story, they didn't want to write it because they'd already written it out in the query letter. So what they want now is generally just a paragraph or two. What you need to know, there's a thing, there are 5 W's and H. It's who, what, when, where, why, and how. And who is your characters? What is the goals of the characters, what they want? When is the time, and whether it's in the future, in the past, in times today? Where is your setting, which is where they are, and why? Why do the characters want? Why do those who people want what they want? And that's their motivation, and that's an important thing to know before you begin. And then how is, well, you write a sort of little thing. Joe and Mary met. They didn't like each other, but then suddenly they did, and you go on, and this is how you progress your story. This is how you do your why. And pretty much that's it. You send it off, and you hope that somebody will want it. And the first query letter I wrote, I will tell you, it took me a whole month to write it and rewrite it and rewrite it, so that this writing a query letter is just like writing a book. And so that's pretty much what it is.
Well, thank you. You certainly gave us lots of details and put it all together for us. So I truly appreciate that. And so far, we don't have any questions for you. And last but not least, we're going to hear from Dawn.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Dawn Barclay, and I currently have 8 published books out there, and I just signed a contract to write 4 more. I write in several genres, including psychological suspense, romantic suspense, erotic romance, and nonfiction. I have been traditionally published by small and mid-sized publishers, and when those contracts expire and the rights revert to me, I republish under my own imprint, Punctuated Publishing. So I do have some experience in what I'll be discussing here. Let's talk about you. You've finally finished your book. Congratulations. Now you have to figure out what you want to do with it. How, or if you publish your book, will really depend on your ultimate goal. Are you looking to write a memoir to create a legacy to leave for your family? Or is this fiction, but more of a hobby, just something to prove to yourself you could write a book that you want to share with friends? Are you looking to write a story, but you don't want to get involved in production and marketing? Or are you a control freak like me, who wants to have your finger in every aspect of the book's final look? Are you looking for maximum exposure and the chance to have a bestseller and maybe a movie deal? All of these decisions will play into the publishing route you ultimately choose. Now, if you want maximum exposure, with the possibility of having your book in bookstores and libraries around the country or even the world, you probably want to be published by a big 5 publisher or one of their imprints. So the major publishers right now are Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, HarperCollins, and Hachette Book Group. And each has smaller divisions that publish different genres. For example, some of Penguin Random House's 250 imprints include Bantam, Valentine, Modern Library, Crown, and Vintage Books. Traditional publishers usually pay royalty advances, and they do everything for you. Editing, layout, cover design. They give you your ISBN code, which we'll discuss later, and some nominal marketing. Some even schedule book tours. Their books are usually available in bookstores and libraries, and some have audiobook, foreign translation, and film divisions. To get a publishing contract with a big 5 publisher, you're going to need an agent, because most won't deal directly with authors. And in my experience, getting an agent is more difficult than getting a contract with a smaller press. Then that's an option I'll discuss later. I'm going to list a lot of different companies for you. Don't worry about writing the URLs down because I'll give you a way to contact me afterward and I'll be able to send you a resource list. But you can find a list of agents on a free resource called querytracker.net. They have a premium version for $25 a year, but you can get basic information from their free version. You can also search something called duotrope.com, Publishers Marketplace, manuscriptwishlist.com, and Writers Market. You can search by genre. So it's really important to know where in the bookstore your book would fall, what shelf, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get a bite from an agent or a publisher. They're going to ask you, what genre is this? And I've had people say, oh, I write fiction, and that's just not good enough. Each agent wants a query letter, and there's an art to writing effective ones, as Janet alluded to earlier, along with a portion of your manuscript. And each tends to want something different, whether it's your first 3 pages, 5 pages, 10 pages, 50 pages, and so forth. Each agent has submission guidelines on their website that you should study before submitting. Many accept queries via online forms on a site called Submittable. Should you query and get an agent's interest, they're going to ask you for something called a full, which is a full manuscript. So it's really important to have your manuscript completed and in a perfect world, professionally edited before you submit it. And yes, that can be expensive. But if this is a career move, you want your work to be as polished as possible before sending it in, because there is a ton of competition out there. Some agents will want marketing plans, comps, meaning what are the other recent books your book is like, and a short bio listing any writing or publishing experience you might have, and a reason why you are the ideal person to write the book you're pitching. The publishing industry is glacially slow. And so you may not hear from anything from 3 weeks to a year or more. And just because an agent says they'll get you an answer in 3 weeks, don't count on it. Most also have rules about whether or not you can resubmit to someone else at their agency if they themselves are not interested. Submitting to more than one agent or publisher at a time is called simultaneous submission, and their guidelines will tell you whether they accept that or not. Agents don't charge you a fee to read your manuscript, and they don't charge you upfront for their work. So if anybody tries to charge you, run. They submit to editors at publishing companies, and if they're successful and they get you a contract, which they'll negotiate out for you, they generally get 15% of your royalties for their efforts. If they have sub-agents who try to sell your foreign translation rights, audiobook rights, and film rights, those sub-agents also get a cut. For example, I recently sold a nonfiction book and my agent got 15%, but her sub-agent got 10% for my audiobook rights. So for audiobook, I was paying out 25%. You should also be aware that Big 5 contracts generally don't pay as much as you can make publishing with a smaller press or self-publishing. But what you lose on individual royalties, you can make up for in additional copies sold, because most big publishers can get your book into bookstores and do some promo for you. However, you should always expect to do a lot of your own marketing, no matter who publishes your book. An easier way to get a traditional publishing contract is with small presses. Some work with agents, but many accept manuscripts directly from authors, and you'll have to negotiate your own contract, although you can always hire an intellectual property attorney to help you. And if you're a member of the Authors Guild, they will review your contract for free and offer suggestions. You can also find names of publishers in the same resources I mentioned earlier for agents. But there's a free online newsletter called Authors Publish that you can subscribe to. And they put out a free book of publishers that accept manuscripts directly from authors who don't have an agent. I've found small publishers to be more responsive, and I've published almost all my books with them. Most specialize in specific genres. So again, it's important to submit to the ones that publish your genre of book, which is why it's important to know what your genre is. They also require query letters, just like agents do, and they can be slow in responding. There are some that will never respond if they're not interested, which is something they allude to in their submission guidelines. No response means no. There are good small publishers and there are bad ones. And you can go to a website called Absolute Right, with right being spelled WRITE, and search under the individual or the name of the individual publisher or agent and read other authors' experiences with that particular individual or company. There is also an author named Victoria Strauss who publishes a free newsletter called Writer Beware at writerbeware.com. And I've written directly to Victoria to ask her specific questions about questionable publisher practices, and I found her very responsive. You'll find that where a big 5 publisher might pay you 10 to 12% royalty per book and an advance on royalties, small presses might pay you anywhere from 25 to 70% on books, on ebooks. 45% is pretty common, but normally they don't pay in advance. They usually can't get your books into bookstores, although this varies. Many don't have subagents to send your books out to procure film rights or foreign translation rights, but many do their own audiobooks. Some are digital only publishers, meaning they won't publish your book in paperback or hardcover, though many will publish a paperback edition. It all varies. Those that publish a paperback do so as a POD, which means print on demand. So they are not pre-printing and stockpiling your books in a warehouse somewhere. And many bookstores won't order POD books, and many small presses make their books non-refundable to bookstores, which is a turnoff to them because they figure if they order the books and they don't sell, they're stuck with them. Some small presses have great editing, some have minimal editing, and promotion and marketing is pretty much up to you. There's a third option called hybrid publishing. There are companies that, if they accept your manuscript, will do all your editing, provide you with cover art, lay out your book, get you an ISBN, which is code bookstores need to sell your book, and upload your book on sites like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple Books, and so forth. They offer marketing advice. Some of them do anyway. They will provide you with however many copies of your book you'd like to buy. And they say they split the costs with you, though some will charge you 100% of what these services cost them, plus they add a huge markup. In my mind, the problem with hybrid publishing is that they charge you so much more than if you did this all for yourself, and it's not that difficult to do. I've heard of people spending $10,000 or more to get their book published when they could have done the same thing for under $2,000 if they'd just been willing to do the research themselves. Some of these hybrid publishers even have the nerve to keep a portion of your royalties for their troubles in addition to the advance payments. So you can tell I don't really like this whole idea. But if you want to say you're a published author and you don't have the need to have your books available in bookstores and you don't want to get involved in anything except writing the book, this might be the way to go. I should add that some bookstores might take your book on consignment, which means that you could speak to individual bookstores, strike up a deal, and leave them with some of your books. If they sell them, they usually pay you 60% and keep 40% for themselves. You'll need to be prepared to go back and say 6 months to pick up your books if they haven't sold. Now, you may have heard of vanity publishing. It differs from hybrid publishing in that they'll accept any manuscript they're sent, and they'll charge you 100% for their services plus a huge markup. Many are unscrupulous and do a terrible job, and you'll end up with a substandard product. You might want to go this route, but I wouldn't recommend it. Finally, there's self-publishing, which means you take control over the production process of your book. This means you'll be in charge of getting the book edited. And there are 3 types of editing: developmental editing, which has more to do with your plot, characterization, dialogue, pace, and continuity, among other things. There's copy or line editing, which has to do with grammar. And there's proofreading, which has to do with finding typos. And there are some overlaps between these. You'll also be in charge of cover design, which is vital because you have to make a book pop online where most people will see it. You also have to lay out the book, get an ISBN, upload the book onto distribution sites like Amazon and Draft2 Digital, which then distributes to places like Apple, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, etc. And finally, you'll be in charge of marketing, which means getting reviews, getting exposure, submitting to contests, working book shows, and more. It's a whole class onto itself. There'll be some upfront costs, and these are costs you may never recoup because the average book sells less than 200 copies. And even if you're making 70% on your ebooks, which is what's left after the distributors like Amazon take their cut, you'll need to sell those books at a competitive rate like $3.99. So for 200 books, you might make $558. If you sell paperbacks, the production costs are higher, but you can make more. If you price your book at $15, production costs might cost you $5, including shipping, and you can make $10 a book. But I find fewer people are willing to pay for paperbacks, especially from a new author. I mention these costs because for a novel to compete with traditionally published books out in the marketplace, you'll need to get professional editing, and a good editor can cost you $1,000 to $3,000 or more, depending on the length of your book. Cover art can run you anywhere from a pre-made cover for about $79 to $800 or more for custom covers. Layout can cost you $100 or more per book, unless you buy a software program like Atticus or Vellum and do it yourself. An ISBN can run you $125 each, or $295 for a group of 10. And then there are costs if you want to get reviews for your books from places like NetGalley, Kirkus, and places like that. There are costs for entering contests, about $65 to $79 for each category. And then the cost for swag and marketing, all that. I know that a lot of authors are at a loss to know where to find good professionals to provide these services. And that's the benefit of joining author groups on Facebook, as well as writers groups like us, Hudson Valley Scribes, to give a little bit of an ad for us, and organizations where authors share their experiences and recommendations. These groups tend to be divided by genre. For romance, there's Romance Writers of America and their various chapters. For mystery, there's Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America. There are groups for science fiction and fantasy, women's fiction, children's literature, nonfiction, and more. A quick search on Google can help you locate the groups that cover your book genre. And again, Hudson Valley Scribes, we accept writers of all genres. Here are some ways to save some money when self-publishing. Find a group of beta readers to read your book for free in exchange for feedback. Goodreads has groups of beta readers, and some charge, but most don't. You can also join a local writers group with a critique group like ours. Check out pre-made book covers on sites like getcovers.com, or design your own with Canva or an app called BookBrush. Do layout for free on the Readsy or Draft2 Digital websites, and always weigh the costs of marketing against the potential return on investment. So I know I've thrown a lot of websites at you. And if you'd like a resource list with these company names and URLs, just send me a request at dawnbarclayauthor@gmail.com. Thanks so much for your attention. If we have some time left, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. You did, excuse me, you did pack in lots of information. And we do have some questions. So, Dawn, did you always want to be a writer?
No, I wanted to be a famous singer, but I have a terrible voice. And if you come to karaoke anytime, I'll prove it to you. But my grandmother got me very excited about writing because I wrote something when I was young. I think I wrote a poem, and she said, "You wrote this? You wrote this?" As if almost accusing me of plagiarism. But it taught me very young that if you want to get some notice and you want to get some praise, you should write. And ever since then, I've wanted to be a writer, though I was a nonfiction writer for a very long time. And fiction was the final frontier that I sort of tackled in my late 40s, early 50s. I'm back to writing both now. I'm writing fiction and nonfiction.
That's wonderful. The next question is, can I be my own agent?
No. I mean, for a small press, you basically are your own agent because you're pitching, but the big five want, unless you have the credentials for being an agent and you're part of their organizations and you've handled a lot of other writers, they're not going to pay any attention to you.
Okay. And can you make a living by being an author?
It depends how thin you want to be. If you don't want to eat, we've got great prospects. I suppose you can. I wouldn't count on it. I don't think you should go into this thinking you're going to make a lot of money. I think you should go into it for the joy of writing. And if you make some money, that's terrific. Other people's mileage might vary, but I couldn't make a living at it at this point. I make some money, and my advances are growing, and my contracts are getting better with bigger publishers, but I can't afford to not sell real estate.
Do any of the other authors want to answer that question?
I was going to say, I think I read somewhere that 1% of the authors make a living at it. And there are, as you can, if you go on to Amazon and you see all the authors, you know that there are very few who make a living at it. I have fortunately known two friends who I mentored years ago, who both ended up making a living at it.
It's funny because when I first met Janet, when I first came to the first meeting, that's when it was Hudson Valley Romance Writers of America. I told Janet that the reason I was there is I wanted to make some money. And she just looked at me and she said, don't go if you want to do that. Because it's really tough. I mean, I had a book that was #1 on Amazon for one brief shining moment, and I still made very little money from it. So,
But on the flip side of that, all it takes is one phenomenal book. Look at Twilight, look at, Shades of Grey. So those were people that just said, hey, I'm going to do a little bit of fan fiction, and their stories took off. So never give up hope. It could happen, but as everybody said, the chances are slim to none. And there's a lot of people out there. Piggybacking on what Dawn said, make sure if you are going to publish that you're presenting your best work, and then you'll have a better chance to see if it is something that you could make a living on. But don't just sit down and the first draft, send it out, because you'll line your bathroom, as Stephen King said, with rejection letters. So, but anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, an interesting thing is I have a book called Murder and Mint Tea that was first published in 1998. It is still selling books. Now, I would say over the years since it's been published, I have probably earned about $40,000 or $50,000 on the book. But this is over, you figure, from 1998 until now. This is over a long period of time. This is at present, it's free and on Amazon, and I have something like 800 reviews on it, so it does very well. And even though it's free on Amazon, I get paid by Amazon for it.
I wanted to piggyback on something that Debbie said, and that is, if you are going to self-publish, make sure you get edited and make sure you get a really good cover, because it's the people that don't that give the stigma to self-publishing of being, trash.
I want to thank you. I have learned a lot about being an author, and I have some friends that I'm going to say, watch this on YouTube. So I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your knowledge, and I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to do this. Thank you very much. And to the audience, we are going to give away 2 tickets, 2 free passes to 5 Wits Escape. If Jack Malazzo is in the audience, I do not see him. How about Mecca? Oh no, I do see John. I'm sorry, Jack Malazzo is here. I'm going to ask you to send your address to rocklandarts@gmail.com, and we will send you the free passes. I want to thank everybody for tonight. And please check out rocklandartsfestival.org. We have more things coming during the week, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much, and good night.